Good morning, wonderful people of the land. Welcome to the Oxford Real Farming Conference. And we're going to start this morning with a little bit of improvised singing. We are here because we care about this land. We are the custodians of this place. Now.
Charlotte Church opening the ORFC. Good morning. We will have more from here. We'll also be talking to the Secretary of State for the Environment, who's been making announcements as protesters gathered over at the Oxford Farming Conference.
These changes will make funding go further, allowing more people to benefit from agreements. From day one, I've heard loud and clear how important that it is for you to plan for the future. I recognise that mistakes were made in the past. I am determined to provide you with that same stability going forward.
More from Emma Reynolds later. Well, we're here in Oxford for the two farming conferences which happen in the city at this time of year. I'm at the Town Hall, which is the base for the Oxford Real Farming Conference, though it actually takes over 9 venues in the city and puts on around 150 events. I've come to talk about just one of them, which will focus on small farms. With me is Patrick Holden, founder and CEO of the Sustainable Food Trust, and also a dairy farmer on 300 acres in Wales. So, Patrick, why should we be worrying about small farms?
Well, we should be worried because they're disappearing. I'll give you a simple statistic. When I started milking in 1973, there were 70,000 dairy farmers in the UK. Today there are 7,000, so that's a 90% decline. So the cultural, social, environmental and climate contribution delivered by Britain's small farmers is huge, and yet it's not being properly valued.
Although we don't lose those areas of farmland, do we? What usually happens is that a neighbour will buy it up and become bigger so that they can survive. So really, does it matter?
Yes, the policy message is get big and probably get more intensive or get out. And even for ourselves in a privileged position where we make cheese from our milk, it's not easy at the moment. So we need to find a way of rewarding farmers that deliver social benefits, cultural benefits, as well as their contribution towards biodiversity and climate.
In Wales, the government might argue that their post-Brexit system will do that.
I don't think so. I think it's better than the English system. The English system really, I can't find a good word for it, to be honest. It's just a mess. But I think the most important thing for both Defra and the devolved nations is to measure the impact of any support package they introduce, and I gather there's a new one in the offing now, and look at the impact on outcomes, social, nature, climate. They're not doing that at the moment.
Also with us is Andy Gray, who farms in Devon on 150 acres. That's very small. How do you make it work?
It is small, and we only make it work by having other sources of income.
So the farm doesn't make money, it's the diversifications around it that do?
The farm makes enough to be interesting, but not enough for a family to live on.
So arguably, should it exist, wouldn't it be more efficient to just sell it to a neighbour or take over a neighbour?
Well, what you're losing is skill sets and the social structure of the countryside and a myriad of other benefits, and that sort of connection and indigenous understanding of how that piece of landscape works. And it then just becomes a sort of more of an amorphous blob in amongst bigger farms where the interpretation of how to farm that is lost.
Now, there is a change which is being announced over at the Oxford Farming Conference by the Secretary of State today, with the Sustainable Farming Incentive, the SFI, which pays farmers for the environmental work they do. There are going to be 2 application windows, one in June for small farmers and one in September for bigger farmers. The idea being, I think, that that's a way of supporting small farms. Will that help you?
Any certainty is helpful. We're actually in our second year of our existing SFI, which means that by the time we finish, we still won't know what's going to happen after the next one. So it's the long-term stability of policy, which we really do need as farmers. Nobody else expects to go sort of on a 3-year cycle of whether or not they've got a particular income stream. So yes, it's helpful, but it's aimed at small farmers, but it's still pretty wishy-washy when it comes to our future.
Andy Gray there. Well, I've walked back up to the OFC, the Oxford Farming Conference. It isn't difficult to spot where it's being held because just at the moment outside there is a protest complete with tractors and horns. Well, I asked some of those here why they'd come.
To be quite honest, it's a complete lack of support from the Labour government still. It has been marginally welcoming what they've done on the inheritance tax. Equally, it's probably made the situation worse.
We're here to say that the government has got it still wrong, and we're here to fight for every farmer, regardless of whether you are under the threshold or over.
You're talking there, though, about tax breaks for really very wealthy people, because the limit now is 2.5 million, that's 5 million for a couple, and the government will say, we've already moved a really long way on this, get real.
All the government has done by doing that has made it enable for people out of big cities to buy houses in the countryside and a little bit of land to turn around and turn into their big lawn.
We've been assured time and time again over the SFI, the Sustainable Farming Incentives, it's going to be coming back out. Angela Eagle only a month ago, just before Christmas, said that it was going to be out in April. Yesterday the news came out it's not going to be until June. They keep putting that back.
Although what they have done is split the application process for that. So smaller farms in June, bigger farms in September, presumably to give more support to small family farms.
Every farm's struggling. We're all struggling. At the end of the day, we're working on a 5-year rotational scale all the time. And if the rules keep changing, it's absolutely, it really does hit every business. It doesn't matter if you're a large business or not.
Well, the Secretary of State for the Environment, Emma Reynolds, made a speech here. She talked about the government building partnerships with farmers. So I asked her how she plans to do that with those protesters who say that they've lost trust in this government.
Well, what I would say is that we have made significant changes to the inheritance tax policy of this government because we have listened to those particularly who've engaged with us quietly and constructively, such as Tom Bradshaw from the NFU. I'd encourage those outside to engage with me directly, write to me. I need to understand what their concerns are. I can't really do that in the current situation if I'm just hearing them honking their horns. But I would say that I do think that my engagement and our engagement as a government with the sector has been very positive, and that the announcement that we made just before Christmas on the changes to the threshold, which are significant from 1 million to 2.5 million, which means a couple could pass on 5 million in addition to the nil rate bands, is a very significant increase in the threshold, and 85% of those subject to APR and BPR won't be paying additional inheritance tax. But we're also doing other things. So we published the independent Minette Batter's profitability review before Christmas. We issued a high-level response, and we're going to set up a new farming and food partnership board. And I'm determined that we keep making the changes to government policy in real partnership with farmers across the country. And as I set out today, also the SFI, the new next iteration of that, will be done in close engagement. I set out some principles today, but we're still going to engage on those principles before we set out the detail a little later this year.
Let's talk about the SFI, which is a subject that came up with the protesters as well. It's England's biggest environmental scheme. It pays farmers for the environmental work that they do on the farm. You've said that when it reopens, because it was closed very suddenly last year, it will reopen in June for applications from small farmers and people not already in a scheme, and then in September for everybody else. Why that split?
Well, we think that it is right that we make this scheme, which, as you say, is a very, very significant part of the government's agricultural budget, more accessible and less complicated. So we had an explosion of the number of actions that are funded from 23 a few years ago to over 100. We want to make it less complex, simpler, easier to access, and we want small farms as well as the bigger farms to be able to access the funds more easily.
Why is that important? This is an environmental payment. It's public money for public
sure.
goods. As long as the work's being done, why does it matter where it's done?
For two reasons. One, fairness, and we are a Labour government. We want more farms to benefit, and we want more areas of the country to benefit from the environmental outcomes that this funding is providing.
Aren't you just trying to re-engineer an environmental payment into a social payment to help small farms?
No, we're not trying to do that, but we do want to make sure that the SFI is fairer going forward.
Just briefly, what is a small farm?
Well, we're going to set out further details about the SFI. One proxy for small farms has been 50 hectares.
Which is 123 acres, which is very small.
Well, we haven't said that that will be the definition. I've just said that that's what's usually used, but it will be an acreage definition. It won't be a revenue definition.
You talked a lot about collaboration in your speech. How do you imagine that looks for farmers?
Sure, well, it's already happening in some parts of the country, and as Minette Batters said in her report, where we do see farms coming together, sharing best practice, in some cases sharing equipment, we know that they are able to boost their productivity, boost their profitability. So we will set out further details of the Farmer Collaboration Fund that I announced today, £30 million over the next 3 years. But it's really to drive that collaboration, to boost the profitability of farms, and I'm really excited about helping the farming community do that and building on what they're already doing.
The people outside, though, will say, that's lovely, but we're really struggling to make any money at the moment. We are struggling to keep our farms going. So initiatives like that are frankly irrelevant.
Well, I wouldn't agree that they're irrelevant, but I do agree that farmers have been experiencing very, very severe challenges. Drought and flooding in the same year. We've got snow at the moment. We've got different pressures with regard to global food prices. Obviously, some of them are up, some of them are down. I know the sorts of challenges that farmers are up against, and I don't underestimate the challenging situation that they find themselves in. And it's for government to work in partnership with them to say, what are the things that we can do to create better frameworks, to bring down barriers to growth, to bring down the barriers that are holding you back. And that's what I set out in my speech. The planning changes are significant that we're consulting on to ensure that farms can build on-farm reservoirs, polytunnels, all sorts of other infrastructure that they need to boost profitability.
The Secretary of State for the Environment, Emma Reynolds. She got a polite reception here in the hall at the OFC. We asked delegates what they really thought.
We use a lot of SFI at home, so when they suddenly pulled SFI, it was a real shock. So hearing that the schemes are coming back and in a much more manageable way with less choice will be great for us, I think.
Yeah, what I heard from the Secretary of State was a clear understanding of all the issues that farming is facing at the moment, and I think that's got to be the first place to get to. I think time has gone by, that's not been the case. Obviously the long road ahead is for those issues to start to get resolved with some clear action plans.
It is quite a pessimistic time. Maybe this change in inheritance tax recently, it's shown some positive signs, but I think it's had a real major impact on farmers' mental health, and I think the stability is needed from the ministers for the future to increase the confidence.
Delegates here at the Oxford Farming Conference. More from here and from the Oxford Real Farming Conference tomorrow. We'll have everything from agricultural policy to Charlotte Church. So do join us here on BBC Radio 4 at 6:30 tomorrow morning. But that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.